There were terrorists and gun battles in shopping malls, some astrophysical battle between light and dark. But this stairway didn't offer that kind of exit or information. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Whither Goest Thou America Festival series of discussions with artists involved in the festival. Today, we're talking with Robert Winn, our great scenic designer, and I'm Bruce DuBose, artistic director of Undermain. I'm coming to you today from what I call the Catherine Owens house. As you can see, it's filled with her collections of things, paintings, and her own work. And this is where I'm archiving Catherine's paintings and writings and letters. And it's great to be here to host this with our longtime company member and good friend, Robert Winn. Hi, Robert.
Hello, Bruce. Hello, everyone. How are you today?
Great. And Robert, you're coming to us from Chicago, actually, where you're working on a new series. Would you tell us a little bit about what you're working on?
Sure. I'm working on an Amazon series called Paper Girls, which is based on a comic, a Marvel comic about a couple of time-traveling paper delivery girls, teenagers. They go all over the place, back in time, forward in time, and present time. I think their base time is mid-'80s sometimes. So interesting project. We're just getting started. So
that's great. You know, for those of you that don't know Robert, beyond his many set designs that you've seen at Undermain Theater over the years, he does production designs on many films and TV series, and we're going to talk some about that today. But notably for you and for us at Undermain, Robert has designed the, well, I guess production design or the mise en scène for our latest virtual production, the centerpiece production of the festival, David Rabe's new play, new solo piece, Suffocation Theory. So we're going to talk a little bit about those differences. And I want to remind everyone that Suffocation Theory is streaming now through April 25th. So be sure and see it. It will stream throughout the festival. And also I want to remind everyone that we're going to be taking questions as we go, but if you'll write your questions in the Q&A feature on Zoom as opposed to the chat, it's easier for us to access those. So as we get started, Robert, let's just talk about some of the film and television work you've been involved with. I know that you were the production designer on Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, the very recent.
Well, I wasn't actually the production designer. I was the lead scenic artist.
I see.
Worked directly with the production designer, Mark Ricker, who's a fabulous guy and a great designer. And luckily we were nominated for our Directors Guild Award for Best Production Design and nominated for an Academy Award.
And I think I saw it on the Golden Globes too, or something maybe.
That's probably true. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not certain about that, but
right. That was a very well received jointly. So, what are some of the other? I know that you worked for several years on the series Queen of the South, and
yeah,
right?
I did work on that for a couple of seasons. I worked on Queen of the South, again, as a lead scenic artist. I've worked on, I started working on film back in the 80s, notably in Dallas at that time. RoboCop was one that I worked on, JFK, Born on the 4th of July, on and on. Then I started traveling more, working on all over the country on different films. I've worked on one of the Pirates of the Caribbean films, the first one, Curse of the Black Pearl. Um, Worked on several other Disney projects, one of which was Alice in Wonderland, the Tim Burton version. Um, Worked on Flubber, which was another Disney film with Robin Williams, and another Robin Williams film, What Dreams May Come, which was sort of a fantasy about death and heaven and hell. Interesting piece.
Wow. It's yeah, it's quite an amazing career you've had, and then you've also somehow found time to do many designs for Undermain as well as other theaters. But in thinking of like some of the set designs you've done for Undermain over the years, I know you are one of the earliest company members that I can remember. You know, all the way back in the mid 80s, I remember you working with us.
Yeah, yeah. The first show I designed was John O'Keefe's All Night Long. I think that was in the 85, 86 season. And
Right.
shortly after that, we did a couple of Fassbinder plays.
Yes.
And then, there's so many, it's hard to remember them all back then. But
And you were the set designer for our original production of David Rabe's Goose and Tom Tom.
yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. And then the rebooted version years later as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, we next season will finally be getting around to doing David Rabe's the workshop of his new play, He's Born, and Robert has already created a set design for that.
Yeah, we started that just before the pandemic started, a little over a year ago. Designed in the books, and actually a lot of the items have been purchased to complete the set and build the set. Then the pandemic happened, and there was no live theater for going on a year now. So
That's right.
I'm looking forward to seeing that staged, actually. And it's a great piece. David did an amazing script, and sort of reminds me of some of the older days of Undermain, the scripts that we used to do.
Yeah,
Really
definitely. Yeah, and you know, maybe we could touch on this just a little bit, that the film and television arts have been a little quicker to create ways to get back to work than the world of theater and you know, the live audience component that theater has makes it a little more difficult. But I would say you were able to resume work on movie and television sets. I don't know, months ago. I mean, when did things really start to get back?
Yeah, we had started a project shooting in Dallas called Cruel Summer, which starts airing in a couple of weeks on Freeform. I worked 1 week in March, and then we were shut down. Sat around, nobody working on it until the end of or the beginning of September. Then we started back. So about 6 months, I suppose, we were just pushed back. But you know, strenuous testing, contact tracing. Twice we were shut down because of COVID infections within the cast, mostly. A couple of times, one time on the crew, twice in the cast. That infections came up from testing. Only 2 of those times we were actually shut down for about 10 days while people quarantined and made sure everything was safe to come back to work. But pretty much a daily testing process, check-in, questionnaire, you know, very rigorous, and it continues now.
Yes.
And the job I'm on now, that we check in every day, make sure everybody's safe.
Right.
But with theater, with the live audience, because in the film industry, since there's no live audience, we're even broken into subsections. So we're categorized uh, through two subsections, A and B, and then both those subsections are categorized 1 through 4. So A1 would be the crew members that would be directly in contact with the cast, with social distancing and mask. And then it progressively goes down from there.
Right.
So B4 people would be people who work in the production office that don't really get on set. But with theater and a live audience, you can't do that because we're all face to face with each other, and especially in a theater like ours, which is a smaller venue, that it's hard to social distance.
Yes. Yeah, but these are things we're moving towards in anticipation of when we can come back. Of course, we'll start with small audiences, but we're already, even to produce the virtual projects that we do, we've got protocols where we have to be tested weekly, and
Sure.
it's been a challenge, and but I have noted that I know at least SAG and AFTRA and IATSE have really innovated to create ways to get their members back to work, and I think that's really admirable, quite frankly.
Yes, it is.
We're having more difficulty in the theater, but I think even there things are beginning to change a little bit. So I would remind people again that if you have questions, please ask them in the Q&A, and we will get to your questions as we go. But while we're on the topic, discussing your stage work and your film and television work, I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about the major differences in designing for those different mediums.
Well, it's really the eye of the viewer, I think, is the biggest difference. That the camera is a very specific viewpoint. There are multiple viewpoints, obviously, but you're designing for everyone's going to see the same image. Whereas in live theater, every audience member is seeing a different image depending on what seat you're in. So I think that, in live theater, the overall image of stage is more important than in film. There are master shots of an entire set, but the reality of it is that in film you're much more focused on specific areas of a set or a location or something like that. So we get a shot list of what the shot's going to be. There's a lot of discussion beforehand in film of it's called a tech scout, of exactly what we're going to shoot, what angle the camera is going to be. So you can design more specifically for that. Theater, it's not that way. We're dealing with all different, 100 viewpoints. So makes it more interesting, and an overall concept, I think. Also, film is generally very realistic, where theater can be more allegorical,
Right.
And yeah.
I would say that in theater, all of your design work goes into that period before the opening. So you're getting all the detail, the painting and everything. It's all done. Whereas on film and television, you're a little more kind of on the fly because, as you say, you're designing for what the camera is going to see all the
Oh,
time.
sure. I mean, it's a constant. Um, you're never really finished with a film set until the camera is actually rolling. Whereas theater, everything's set. Usually, very close to being finished a week before we open, if not sooner. Um, but in film, it's a and because like say an episode of a television show has multiple days of shooting, so we're working on those sets, every minute of every day, just staying ahead of the camera, moving forward.
Right. Are there times, Robert, on a film where you all have created uh, a set and everything is shot on that, they move on, then they decide later on they're going to have to go back and reshoot some scenes? You have to recreate, or you try to hold on to the various settings?
Yes, both actually. Usually, if we have a set built on a soundstage, we try to keep that set standing as long as possible, unless we just need the space. If we're shooting in a location, um, then wait until we get a strike order that everything's approved. The film, everyone makes sure the film has been, the scenes are shot well and there's no issues. Um, I keep a Bible of finishes, paint colors, textures. So oftentimes we'll have to do something called an insert shot, which you have to create just a small section of a set. It could have been months ago that they shot this set. And insert shots are things like someone looking at a Polaroid photograph, for instance, where it's just a hand in a photograph um, with the set in the background. It's usually not the actual actor's hand. It's just someone else's hand.
Right.
But those things happen all the time. We do insert shots. Usually there'll be an entire day of just shooting insert shots for things
Yes.
and multiple sets.
Well, must be kind of dizzying to keep up with all of it, but I'm sure you've worked out your way of, cataloging every
Right.
scene. Yeah. One thing that I wonder about is in a lot of the sets that you've designed with on shows where I've directed and other shows, you're able to get in an amazing amount of detail. And I'm thinking right now in particular of Annie Baker's John that we did a few seasons ago. It was kind of the interior of this house that was an old B&B. And I think I would try to encourage people in the intermission that they, or even after the show, that they could go up and take a look at some of the detail because it really tells its own story in a way. But I'm wondering if you think there's more of an opportunity to get detail like that in the theater, or I guess cumulatively on a film or TV show, there's probably a lot of detail that we're not even aware of.
Right. Yeah, so much of the film and television industry, the audience doesn't really see so much of it because, the storytelling is all about the actors in the end. That particular show, John, was an incredible undertaking for detail. Annie Baker had a vivid description of the set and and a lot of details involved. Linda Nolan helped with that, longtime collaborator with us and with props and gathering tchotchkes, and we had a lot of stuff on there, and it was really a lot of fun, and it was fun to walk around the set and look at things. But film, yeah, we get very detailed. specifically, again, specifically for certain shots. I remember once I was designing a film on the Playroom, and Julia Dyer was the director, and she said, "You know, it's funny. I walk into these sets and I feel like there's not enough, and then we set up the camera, and it's more than enough." But you know, because we're specifically designing for that shot, especially on a tight budget. You know.
That's right. Yeah. Again, in theater, the audience is seeing everything all at once, where
Right.
on the film, the camera is allowing you, you're only seeing what the camera allows minute by minute, I guess. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, you know, if people could see what was behind the camera, generally in a, you know, even in someone's bedroom, which seemed like a small room, um, oftentimes, you know, the fourth wall is pulled away just to make room for all the people and camera and lights and.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I know that in the theater, a lot of times your designs have to also take in what might really be referred to as special effects. I mean, for example, on John, we had this whirly gig that came out at the end, and the main character pretended to light it. Of course, we don't really use open flame in the theater, and so we had little digital candles in it that weren't really lit, and yet you created the effect of how it would make it spin, because usually these things it's the heat from the
Right.
candles that causes the motion, and we needed that to happen so it would chime at the end. There's a whole series of things that happened at the end, but that was part of it.
Right.
And you seem to have a real knack for creating special effects that most of us sit around and go, how are we going to do that?
Yeah, I like those challenges of creating things. You know, Catherine used to call me the king of cheese because sometimes those effects would be so, you know, on the back side of the effect, viewing it from our perspective, so cheesy. I would, you know, describe it, but. You know, like that, for instance, was just that whirligig was run by a computer fan mounted underneath that was part of the mechanism that ran on a battery.
Right.
Very quiet, and you know, it just made the thing spin. Um, you know, I've always liked those kinds of challenges in theater of making this. One of the proudest things I did was years ago on I think it was the Hyacinth Macaw. There had to be pull a moon out of a suitcase, and
I was just thinking of that. I was thinking that
and
the moon coming out of the suitcase would inspire gasps and awes in the audience all the time.
I think that was probably the cheesiest one I ever did, and when Catherine gave me that moniker, because it was so simple. Luckily we had double suitcases because the character walked around with the suitcase most of the show. And I took the second suitcase and cut the back out of it and just put a piece of black velour where, you know, it was just a magic trick, really,
Right.
an illusion.
Yeah.
And
Well, and so to let me explain it a little further for the audience, is that just kind of a regular old Samsonite suitcase would open, and this rather, I'd say, medium to large size spherical glowing moon would come out, and it was kind of a sleight of hand, because you were like, how did that just happen? But it was a marvelous moment. And I see Teresa there. I know we have a question I'm going to ask, but as long as we're on the special effects side, you're also kind of a master sculptor with styrofoam, which you've made many different things over the years. But one of the greatest effects I can remember is that we had a false wall that looked like the back wall of the theater for Goose and Tom Tom. And it was
right.
up there for the entire play until like the last 10 minutes, when these beings that we call them the archons burst through, and the wall caved in, and it actually seemed like the wall of the building was coming unlodged or something.
Yeah, that was fun to sort of create. My styrofoam sculpting days come from, I started out in my career that developed into film. I started out working on operas and Dallas Opera and other operas around the country. So we did a lot of sculpting, a lot of painting.
Yeah.
And that was a fun one to do, actually.
Yeah.
There was
there's
a great,
there's a real art to the whole styrofoam sculpting.
yeah.
Well, I see we have some questions, so let's catch up with that. I want to remind everybody, ask your questions in the Q&A, and it's easier for us to access. So, hi, Teresa. Uh-oh, you're muted.
I think you're muted.
Yeah. Okay, I have two questions.
Okay.
The first one is from Deborah Nugent, and it is, can you contrast designing with the budgets now versus designing when you first started designing at Undermain?
Oh my. Yeah, well, when I first started designing at Undermain, we usually sat around 40 to 50 people in the theater, maybe. And pretty much the company just came down every weekend and we built everything ourselves. In some ways, because it was such a small footprint of audience, it was easier to design in the space because you had more room to do different things, because there were less seats. Now, you're a bit more confined in the physical space itself because of the amount of chairs that we have. But the budgets are wonderful comparatively because now we have Ken Bernstein, our great technical director, who deals with putting the shows together. Every aspect, does a great job. Props, set dressing, set building, lights, really keeps the facility going. And it's nice not to have to spend every free minute at the theater putting things together.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I should let people know that a lot of times, although Robert is very active in terms of when he designs, although now we have a system where Robert designs, Ken Bernstein, our technical director, hires a crew and they build that design. Whereas probably, I guess back in the 80s and probably into the 90s, you were down there building it as well.
Sure.
And the rest of us were doing that too. But, and like you say, back then, I don't even know if we ever talked in terms of budget or not, but it was just like, how can we do this for next to nothing?
Yes, exactly.
Whereas now, although we do have our budgets are for the size of space and everything are very healthy budgets. We have money to accomplish this stuff, and yet some of it is still the challenge of how will we create this is always overcome by the creativity of someone like Robert. The challenge is almost, in a way, stimulates that creativity. So that's still, I think, part of the equation.
Sure, I think that's a fun part of it is figuring things out on the budget that we have and not,
Yeah.
We were talking about film, oftentimes, I mean, films are never unlimited budgets, but they, the budget difference is amazing compared to what theater is.
Yes. And what's our next question?
This question is from Robin Letterer. And Robin would like you to talk about working in the Undermain space, especially given the columns.
Yes. Well, the columns, I've embraced them. I've been down there for over 30 years. I learned early on two things. Um, there's always going to be a moment in every play where someone's going to have a blocked view of some action. So luckily, experienced directors down there like Bruce and they've learned to not keep a scene static in one area for too long because of that. Um, there's not a long period of time where someone's just not seeing any of the action of the play. I also learned a long time ago that arranging the seats in sort of a staggered fashion away from the columns as the rows go back helps with the sight lines. But you just have to embrace them. It's the only way around it. They're there. I like to try to incorporate them into the set. I think that works best. Just let them be part of what we're seeing because they're right up front.
Right. Would you say that at Undermain in particular, that designing a set for a production at Undermain also means you're kind of designing the seating configuration?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, with Ken, luckily, we've had some, he sort of has some seating arrangements that are sort of typical for, say, if we're doing a proscenium style or an arena style, that you can sort of reference. In the past, in the old days, we drag the seats around, all over the place. Now with Ken there to have these patterns in place, and we already know how many seats we can fit in a certain configuration, and that the sight lines are mostly good for everyone, and so that's been helpful. He's been really helpful with that.
Yeah. I would say let's talk a little bit about our virtual productions we've been doing. Now, you've designed both St. Nicholas and Suffocation Theory, and you're also designing our upcoming virtual production of Heda Gabler.
Yeah.
So these are a little bit of a hybrid somewhere between theater and film. And are there any particular challenges that you've noted in these?
Well,
designs?
I feel like St. Nicholas was less challenging than Suffocation Theory because of just because of the locations mentioned in each piece. Suffocation Theory was, David's a very descriptive author, and there was a lot of description of things which luckily it sort of lent itself to the physical space of the basement and the surrounding area of the building, interior and exterior. But unlike a theater piece, we moved around to different locations, especially in Suffocation Theory. We shot outdoors a bit and in different parts of the building to sort of get some of those, the feelings of those locations that he described. And, in St. Nicholas, there were certainly descriptions of those locations as well. Not quite as descriptive as David's, or maybe descriptive in a different way. But that particular piece lent itself to as a designer, that you could sort of have one element of a location, like say, for instance, the vampire's house, we just had a stained glass window. Whereas with Suffocation Theory and David's piece, there were more elements involved to sort of tell that story.
Yes.
Unlike theater, you know, in Undermain, we generally don't do a lot of scene changing in between scenes and acts. Some, but not so much. But you know, in these virtual pieces, we have actually reconfigured the space for certain camera shots and things like that. I think it helps push the story along on film, doing that, as opposed in theater. You know, viewing film, we're not used to our having a suspension of disbelief that we are when we view theater. So I think we have to push that a little more in these virtual pieces to establish locations that we don't have to do in live theater.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah, and let me remind everyone that you'll be able to see these virtual designs that Robert has been creating for us with Suffocation Theory, which is streaming now through April 25th, and coming up in May when we begin streaming Heda Gabler. And I would say that we've kind of made a decision along you and my approach is that rather than to create a bunch of sets, we're letting the atmosphere of the Undermain be a part of these sets. For example,
Yes.
certainly that's true in Suffocation Theory, but even your design for Heda Gabler, while there's some molding indicating that a wall might be there, there's actually no walls. So you actually are seeing
Right.
the columns and the bare walls of the theater. That's
yeah, I think that, I mean, it's I don't think either one of us really wanted to just film a play as sort of an archival footage of a live action play. I'm certainly not opposed to that. I think it's better when there's a live audience to film a play that way. But if we're creating a presentation, I think you and I both agree we would rather not do that, of just set up a camera and watch a play from beginning to end without a more interesting concept visually. You know?
Yes. And so ultimately what happens is that we shoot these scene by scene, of course, the way you would a film, including Heda, the way we plan to shoot that is not like as a continual performance, but it
Right.
might even be shot out of sequence. But in a way, and I think this happens too with a lot of plays that we do at Undermain, is the space itself, the Undermain, becomes almost a character in the thing. It's very much a presence.
Oh yeah. Well, like I said earlier, you have to embrace the columns, which means you're embracing the space. I mean, I think more, you know, with not so much for the upcoming Heda Gabler, but for Suffocation Theory and St. Nicholas, we not only embrace the columns, we embrace the concrete walls as well. You know, and then just added elements to create a location. I mean, I think Heda is leaning a little more towards a traditional theater set, just because that particular location is you know, the play takes place in a more elegant location than the other two pieces we've done so far.
Right. So let me remind everybody that if you have we're taking questions, but as they come up, but if you have a question, ask it in the Q&A feature, which is easy for us to access in this format. Also, we're speaking today with Robert Winn, who's our designer for so many of our productions at Undermain, and he's currently on location in Chicago. And what's the title of the television show you're working on currently?
Paper Girls.
Paper Girls.
Yeah. like newspaper delivery girl.
Can I jump in here because I
Yes,
have
so we have our next question.
and I think you did touch upon it a little bit in what you were just talking about, but this is also from Deborah Nugent. What should we notice regarding the set of suffocation theory, and what are you most excited about?
I think you'll notice in suffocation theory, the set that you'll see some places in the building that aren't in the theater, and sort of be surprised by that. I'm excited about, well, I mean, the whole piece excites me, really. You know, the fact that we've put this thing together and we've come through it and come up with a nice piece and visually something interesting. You know, we have in the play itself, there's 2 locations, mainly 2 apartments, and multiple locations within those apartments. And I think we've managed to pull that off, which is exciting to me. You know, that, and visually, I think it's stunning.
Yeah, and we shot in the stairwell of the
Right.
building, and we shot outside, and pretty much, we shot in the green room of the theater where many of you have visited, and
Right.
so we tried to use just as much of the
We
space.
shot in your car.
Yes.
Yeah. And we shot at the building, or the door going to the roof of the actual building as well, in that stairwell. So 6.5 floors up.
Yeah. So it was great I mean, the Undermain building itself has so much atmosphere that it really makes a great place to do something like this. It's got a real authentic quality just because of the time that it was built in, I guess, which is like 1907 or something. So
right.
That really added a lot. Now, on Heda Gabler, rather than shooting in multiple locations, we're really shooting concentrated in the center of what we use as the theater space. And really, it's become more of a collection of set pieces. Can you describe some of the things that we are gathering to create this set with?
Yeah, I mean, we're, you know, it's quite a few pieces of antique furniture, beautiful pieces. Cindy Ernst is working with us, gathering things. We have a beautiful backdrop of Norwegian countryside. Ken's doing a fabulous job of putting these moldings together that sort of create the illusion of where walls would be, separate rooms. A lot of set dressing, which would be good. Props, you know, some dueling pistols and things like that.
Yeah, we have the particular challenge of finding replica dueling pistols that could be, because Heda, who's such a devilish character, she, well, famously fires one of these pistols more than once. At one point, she's firing out into the garden while another character is trying to make an entrance there.
Right.
Very dangerous moment. But so we had the challenge of, well, we need, of course, replicas, but maybe one that we could load a cap in so that we can get a spark. And of course, we can always dub the sound, but you were able to pretty quickly find just such a dueling pistol.
Yes. I found 2 versions of French, and I think there was an Italian version, we went with the French version. I thought it was prettier. And, it's funny, you Google things and surprisingly come up with exactly what you want. Took a little bit of searching to find one that we could actually put a cap in, but thank goodness for cosplayers today, because they like to have those kinds of things.
Oh, that's true.
So really I got these two dueling pistols from a place called Replica Arms, I think, in Atlanta, Georgia. And they had all sorts of armory from all time periods, not just firearms, but swords and knives and even some cannons. So,
right.
Kind of exciting.
Amazing. Yeah, and so just to remind everybody, we're currently streaming Suffocation Theory by David Rabe, which Robert did the design for, and that will stream through the 27th, the 25th of April, and along with the other readings that will be streaming over that time. And then Robert, as we were just discussing, is the designer for our upcoming virtual production of Heda Gabler. So I would just like to invite, if anybody has any further questions, this would be a great time to ask them, as we're kind of nearing the end of our time with Robert today. So some of the topics we've discussed are the differences between his designs for film and television and theater. And I would just say that in addition to the Undermain, where you've designed for many years and you're a company member, you've also designed for Shakespeare Festival.
Yeah. Echo Theater.
Echo Theater.
Kitchen Dog Theater.
Right.
Who else? Old Addison Center Theater, which is now Water Tower.
Right.
Yeah, all around.
That's right. So if we don't have any more questions, I guess we'll conclude our discussion with Robert today and invite everybody to come back and join us every Sunday during the festival. We're going to have more discussions with directors and playwrights. And next week, we begin streaming Teresa Marrero's Secondhand Conversations with Irene. And I believe next Sunday is our next discussion with her. Robert, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today, and for your many years as a really, really valuable member of our company.
So, that was my pleasure.
Right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
So long, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Soon. Stream Suffocation Theory.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.